In the spirit of sisterhood, we've kicked out David from the podcast and we have a guest host. We have Sam Burrows with us.
So leadership have to portray the behaviours that really drive a culture.
The kind of timescales that we're talking about are in the nanoseconds, like a billionth of a second.
Burger King actually is getting into the AI world. They chose a fantastic name for their chatbot.
How do we support women to push through that, glass ceiling and barrier?
It's not the easiest quiz I've ever put together.
Wait a minute, this is my first one.
Yeah, well.
So welcome back to episode 12 of the CTO Lens. It is International Women's Day this week. So we have, in the spirit of sisterhood, we've kicked out David from the podcast and we have a guest host. We have Sam Burrows with us. Sam, it's such a delight to have you. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience who may not have met you previously?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, especially for this week. So I'm Sam Burrows. I have been in technology delivery probably over 30 years. Starting off in kind of events and sports, broadcasting, advertising, aviation and cruising, so travel. And now I'm actually at the Ellison Institute of Technology. So one of the things we're trying to do is look at how we take kind of scientific programs, underpinning them with big cross-cutting platforms, providing these big capabilities across AI and science, and then how do we try and move that to scale? So how do we try and solve some of the world's biggest problems? So how do we predict the next pandemic? And how do we look at sustainable seeds, for example? Interestingly, quite relevant because for our discussion later with our guests, we're looking at how do we actually then build and be able to scale the scientific compute required to deliver that, which is obviously a topic that we'll come on to later. I'm also on the advisory board of Scouted, which is an AI platform enabling football clubs to build their unique DNA so they can look for the next talent that they want to sign. So reducing the stress and hassle of having to randomly, or, they go to clubs and they watch talent, but they don't always know which talent. So we're building this platform that will help us build this kind of DNA, because each club is different for what kind of striker they're looking for versus the goalie they were looking for. And then my real love and passion is sport. And I know that we've talked about this before. So I've worked at 3 Commonwealth Games and the London 2020 Olympics. And actually, I'm just about to leave the Ellison Institute because I'm following my Ikigai, which is those, what are you good at, what the world needs, what can you be paid for, and what do you love? So I'm off to work at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow 2026 because I can bring all the things that I am so passionate about, sport, tech, ops, and bring it all together. So I'm off to do that.
Amazing. Well, big congratulations to you, Sam. That sounds absolutely incredible. Any story of anyone following their Ikigai is always something that is going to warm my cockles for a good week or so. So I think that'll carry me through to International Women's Day on Sunday. And for anyone who is a part of the London Tech Leaders Fold and is coming to our event on Thursday, this will not be the last you hear of Sam this week. So if you haven't signed up already on Thursday, we have our Women Plus Tech Leaders. It's our 4th event in this sort of sub-series of all of the events that London Tech Leaders put on. From 5:30 till 8, you can join us and to be talking about using culture as a leadership tool. We have some absolutely fantastic speakers. So Sam, of course, is going to be chairing our sort of fireside chat panel. We have Manogna Machiraju, we have Lacey Firestone from Kindle, we have the incredible Joanna Crown from Moonpig. It's going to be absolutely amazing hearing the discussion all around, using culture as a leadership tool, which is particularly relevant for International Women's Day, because often I think we find that women end up being the culture carriers in their organizations, and sometimes that's by choice and sometimes it's not. And so we'll be able to kind of discuss, how do you use culture? Should you use culture? How does that intersect with being a female leader in the tech world? But I mean, Sam, this is something that I know you're chairing the panel on Thursday. What are your thoughts around this? How do you think culture kind of shows up in organizations? As women, should we be embracing our role as culture carriers, or is it something we should be resisting?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this often, and obviously we'll refer it to anyone coming along, but I think it's so critical to develop, we're going to talk about quiet culture. And my view of quiet culture is very much around organizations that tend to bang on about how amazing it is to work in an environment and they're really driving it, often kind of misses the mark a little bit, because actually culture is about showing up every day with the behaviors that you want to see. But we do know that that does come from leadership. So leadership have to portray the behaviors that really drive a culture. I'm very passionate about this, and I think we see it sometimes that kind of openness, honesty, transparency, and accountability isn't always seen in leadership. And I think that is the most important thing about how we drive culture, or I wouldn't even say drive, embed a culture through. Because if you see those leaders walking around being kind, creating psychological safety, by putting their hands up when they've got it wrong, by celebrating success, but by giving those safe spaces when we fail, that's actually a really key part of being a leader, whether you're female or male. So obviously we're talking about it through International Women's Day, but I think it's really important that women need to lead like women and not like men, or certainly lean more to a feminine side. But women also need very much those male advocates to sit with them, to work together. And it's really about equity and equality and diversity, right? Giving everybody the opportunity and finding the right balance in your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll come on later in the podcast to talk about, International Women's Day and what we're seeing in tech and women and the intersectional aspect too later in the podcast. But yeah, really looking forward. I do believe we have a few spots left at the events. They tend to fill up pretty quickly, so you can sign up to that. It's completely free on our website, londontechleaders.io. Look at our latest events, and we'll be having this sort of fireside panel chat. There's also fantastic networking at all of our events, so do sign up if you haven't already. We've got a lot that has been happening in the news this past week. So let's take a moment to look at what's been happening through the lens of technology. And it would be remiss of us not to touch on conflict in the Middle East. Of course, this is a very big item that's hitting the news. It's very significant in the broader sort of geopolitical landscape at the moment. We are not a political podcast. I think it's fair to say that conflict that leads to, suffering, death anywhere is absolutely heartbreaking. And of course, there's an intersectional angle on this. But if we look at this from a tech perspective, we're starting to see a couple of themes coming out in the news. One is Reuters have reported on impact on AWS data centers in Bahrain and the UAE. What's interesting about this is that the impact we've seen has been during the Iran strikes, but the way it's been reported, or the way it's been sort of spoken about by the relevant parties, is a little bit agnostic. So it was reported as a data center was hit by unidentified objects, which sort of caused a fire, and there were local emergency service that cut off power to the building, and that shut down. It took an entire AWS availability zone. So that's a sort of cluster of data centers that run cloud services in the UAE and Bahrain offline. And we had companies that were reporting service issues and delays across AWS services at the same time, but there was no clear confirmation that those service issues or delays were relating to the sort of effect at the data centers. And AWS itself has yet to confirm or deny, when it has been previously asked, whether there's a direct connection between the strikes that have been happening in the region and the damage. But of course, the timing has raised concerns more broadly about cloud infrastructure. That is something that is kind of, it's a global phenomenon, being vulnerable during times of military conflict. Sam, did this catch your newsfeed, or what's your perspective on sort of the impact of on the tech world of the conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East?
Yeah, look, it's not something that, and actually from someone who tries to steer away from news, because quite a lot of us get driven by our anxiety. And I think it's also important to recognize not everybody will want to dig into these topics. But I certainly think, obviously this is unconfirmed, but we'll continue to hear stories like this, I think, as this kind of develops. One of the really interesting things I think, certainly when it comes to tech and the impact that it'll have, is around the cybersecurity side of this. We'll talk about AI again a little bit, but I think certainly when it comes to cybersecurity, Fortune, actually, there was an article that Fortune had launched. So according to cyber intel firm Flashpoint, a kind of major Iranian prayer app, interestingly, with over 5 million downloads, was hacked and started sending out multiple kind of manipulated notifications in the midst of these strikes. And I think this is one of the things that will continue to develop. Iran's got quite a kind of decentralized cyber response due to its leadership loss. So I think that we will continue to see kind of hacktivist groups acting independently, certainly as the instability and unpredictability around that kind of space. And that will continue to cause, I think, probably a bigger risk globally. Experts have been warning the US and Western companies that really they should think about elevating their exposure. Not that hasn't happened before, obviously, because of the Ukrainian-Russian war. So we've seen that, companies are hacked more and more now, but I think this is another layer on top of that and everything that we're seeing right now. And certainly then again, you start layering on AI and deep fake alerts that we'll start seeing. I think we've got to be prepared for that. And certainly US and Western companies need to start elevating kind of what they're facing with those exposures.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of you have this paralleling of technological instability or risk with the geopolitical stability and risk. So moving on, we have some more news that relates to I guess defense is one term for it. Well, it's not the only term we'll use in this segment. And AI or modern technology. So this is all about Anthropic versus the Pentagon, also known as the Department of Defense, also known as the Department of War, which is a recent renaming by Trump. Yeah. So the background to this is that Anthropic have contracts with I'll call it the Department of Defense. And Pete Hegseth has been asking them to accept any lawful use of that technology. But interestingly, that includes mass domestic surveillance and fully autonomous weapons, which Dario Amodei, obviously the sort of CEO of Anthropic, is objecting to because he believes they may undermine rather than defend democratic values. And so in response to the rejection of these kind of expansion of the use within the contracts between Anthropic and the Department of Defense, the Department of Defense is threatening to remove them from the supply chain altogether. And interestingly, Anthropic does not seem to care. Amodei said, should the department choose to offboard Anthropic, we will work to enable a smooth transition to another provider. So for me, this is really interesting, and I want to know your thoughts on this, Sam. I think there's this one really big question we have of AI, AGI being a general tool being used for nefarious means. And just last week, David and I were talking about Demis Hassabis, who's been calling for regulation around specific use cases. The ones he cited were loss of control, which sounds as if it is potentially could be parallelized to this fully autonomous weapons concept, and also use of AI by bad actors. I don't think we want to say on this podcast that the US government is a bad actor, but it's obviously something that's incredibly subjective. But it is fantastic to see Anthropic taking the moral high ground. It's not something that can be said for all tech or all AI companies. But defense ultimately is a really hard one because of that subjectivity. It really depends on your perspective. What is defense and what is war? We would say we want defense, but we don't want war. But sometimes those things can be two sides of the same coin. And of course, there's a lot happening geopolitically at the moment. Sam, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a real balance, as you say. Good for them for standing up, is what I would say. I think there was reference to Claude's involvement in the US operation in Venezuela. So, we can't say that for sure, and that's allegedly. But again, those kind of that dispute was kind of really rooted in those earlier tensions with them. I think it's important that we look at current AI systems and whether they're reliable enough. Certainly for building, kind of autonomous weapons. and mass surveillance, right? And unless we are at a point where legislation is in place and we can really improve AI safety, yeah, I mean, look, do I really want AI building our weapons or surveilling us? Probably not. Not at the moment. So,
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with you on that one. And I think I'd agree with you now. I think I'd agree with you in the future. So, Sam, have you often used pre-mortems in your work? You're aware of this concept of a sort of pre-mortem?
no, I'm not. So, do you want to
Oh,
explain a
fab.
bit more?
Yeah, no, I would love to. So a pre-mortem is you kind of sit down and say, if as a company we failed completely in the next, whatever your horizon is, 12 months, 5 years, this is what it'll be. And we have a new pre-mortem that has come out from Citrini Research. And it asks the question of what would a pre-mortem look like in the future of AI? So I'd love to tell you about this.
You're great.
So it's written from the perspective of June 2028, which is not that far away. It's, spring has sprung outside. And so spring 2028 is definitely on
2
its
years,
way.
yeah.
So according to Citrini Research, and for full disclosure, this isn't kind of modeling. There's no data that's come into this. It's really a thought experiment of what could happen with the future of AI and this kind of AI boom that we're seeing at the moment. So in this imagined future, what happened was AI tooling became the default interface for work and daily life in 2026. And as part of that, companies replaced white collar workers with AI, which we're seeing already. We are seeing with certain big tech firms, these sort of mass redundancies while they embrace AI. And what that did is it led to huge productivity gains. It lowered operating costs. And in this fictional, 26, 27, 28, there was rapid profit growth for companies, which sounds fantastic. But because of that, something that emerged was there's something called ghost GDP. So what normally happens is that companies generate profits. Those profits go into wages of the people working for the companies. Those people working for the companies spend their money, leading to consumption. And that's the big kind of cycle that drives the economy. But in this envisioned maybe fictional future, what happens is that profits do not equate to wages because, of course, you're not paying a person. You've invested in an AI that's doing the work that a person would do. So income for ordinary people collapses, and that leads to this sort of ghost-like growth because it's not circulating through the human economy as we experience it happening now. So in this future, first of all, several business models are destroyed. The SaaS software model, doesn't exist anymore because AI agents can just build custom tools in-house on demand. So we don't need SaaS software. We're going to cancel all of our subscriptions. A second consequence in this fictional world is that consumer platforms that are built on habit, they cease to exist as well because, human behavior is sticky, but AI is rational. So instead of having a scenario where consumers say, oh, I love this brand with my human heart, they say, well, I asked ChatGPT and ChatGPT said, this is the product that I should buy. So you lose that benefit of brand and all of the sort of intellectual capital around that. Same for payment networks. AI can just automate payments in the most efficient way. So we have all of these business models that just don't exist anymore. But it doesn't stop there. What we also see in this fictional future is an impact on financial systems. Because this sort of SaaS credit bubble bursts, so many SaaS companies are financed by private credit loans. We see investors, big examples including pension funds and insurers, are taking losses. We also see a housing market crisis as these white collar workers who have been made redundant through the embracing of AI, they default on their mortgages. So we might see something like back in 2008, although it's a different scenario because of course that was a bubble and these are, valid mortgages, but just a change in the financial position of their owners. We see impact on government systems, of course, because public infrastructure relies on wage taxing, and we see social consequences, unemployment versus wealth concentration of people running the AI companies, leading to political unrest, etc. So, it sounds a little bit scary. And again, it's not predicting the future. It's not modeling what is going to happen. It's really raising the question of if AI succeeds too well, could it succeed faster than society can adapt it? And what could the consequences be? So I don't know about you, Sam. I have a little shiver on, my hairs are standing on the back of their legs.
Yeah.
What do you think hearing this?
Look, I think we should embrace this kind of fourth industrial revolution rather than being scared of it, right? There is so much opportunity for people. So I think, yes, some roles and jobs and even kind of, whether SaaS still exists or not, may or may not disappear. I think the way that humanity goes to work, earns money, or do they, right? Because the reality is if robots come along and they take that and AI takes the other part of it and the whole lot together means that the reality is we're run by robots, AI and tech, well, then we spend more time doing things in the hospitality sector. We go on holiday more. I mean, we have to work out how we're going to tax labor because labor will be free in theory. So how do we pay for it? And it'll go round and round in circles. But I think we're a long way off from the infrastructure being in place to be able to manage it. And I think we'll touch on it again, the cost of running cloud infrastructure, which still drives AI, is enormous. So that infrastructure isn't going to change in the very immediate, although it'd be interesting to hear later more about that. I think humans will always find a way anyway to carve out whatever is the right thing for them. It's an interesting concept though, isn't it? That all of those things will change radically. I don't think they'll change at the speed that everybody thinks they will. Even though you hear some tech leaders talk about that, certainly Larry Ellison and Elon Musk are very much, this is kind of 5 years away. I'm not sure it's 5 years away because, again, of all the things we've just talked about. So, yeah. And your thoughts, Sophie, on it?
Yeah, I think I really agree with a lot of what you've said. I think considering all of the ifs and buts, and as you say, compute is one example, and there are some where you can sort of imagine a future where it's solved, and some where you really need to look at these cutting edge, next generation, completely innovative technologies to imagine it happening. So many ifs and buts that it doesn't feel like this scenario is going to happen by June 2028.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a reason for these kind of high profile, almost celebrity tech leaders to be saying it's coming, it's just around the corner, everyone get excited and give me a bunch of money to build it. And do you know what's interesting? I was listening to an example the other day of two different paths that can be taken for different jobs where AI is introduced. And the two examples were given were being a taxi driver. So taxi drivers around London, their intellectual capital was the kind of what made them special and what made them valuable, because learning all of the streets around London, it was hard to do. But actually that hard part of the job was automated. And now we have GPS. And so anyone who has a car, maybe at some point a self-driving car, anyone who has a car and a GPS can do that job. So the hard part was automated. Whereas if you compare that to accountants, which was the second example, all of the kind of easier bits, the sort of organizing files and putting numbers in places and calculations and things like that, that was automated. But the hard part of the job, which were the sort of the judgment calls and the experience and having seen lots of cases and really deeply understanding the nuances and the trends, has not yet been automated. And that's why, we see kind of accountants getting more expensive, paid more, and taxi drivers potentially getting paid less. So I do think there's, more of a nuance than potentially this example raises that is worth considering.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, I would still rather get in a black cab.
Yeah, same. I think I'm with you on that one. I'm not quite on board the Waymos yet, either metaphorically or physically.
Yeah.
Amazing. But we do have some exciting, here in the UK, we have some exciting news about how we're thinking about introducing AI in the civil service. This is some new AI projects that are coming to our good old civil service as a part of the Civil Service AI and Data Challenge, which ultimately encourage public sector workers to propose projects, using new technology to improve services. Have you come across this, Sam, or can I read out a few of the different use cases that arose from this?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Amazing.
Some exciting things that they're thinking about.
Yes. Which
I
really
think
does.
Actually, when you do shows, this is really how great AI and data can improve rather than replacing, right? So how does it enhance?
Yes, absolutely. How does it make us smarter without replacing us? So my favorite, so this is a list of some of the sort of shortlisted items, and they'll pick one of them that it gets, I think, a £50,000 development prize later in the year. So we saw a proposal around AI verification to identify fraudulent documents submitted to HMRC, which is super logical. No one likes a tax dodger. I think I can really get behind that one. We also saw a proposal around AI-enabled cameras using to safeguard birds as they approach wind turbines,
I
which
know.
is
I
really
think
cute.
that's so sweet.
Yeah, it's really lovely. I think I don't know how it works, whether you sort of have a net that comes out and grabs them or what happens there. We had one, and this one feels really relevant. So this is using government and open source data for extreme weather tracking, which is, obviously as we start to see various locations more affected by climate change, potential massive opportunity to sort of support people with early warning systems. We saw another one, and this one I'd love to know your thoughts on because I think it's at risk of being a little bit controversial. So this is casework compliance assistant tooling for the Department of Work and Pensions. To me, this is controversial because on the one side, we hear about mass benefit fraud all the time. And, is it true? Is it not true? Is it kind of spin doctoring for vote securing? At the same time, we also hear many stories of people, particularly those affected by disabilities, being denied basic needs or funds that will enable them to live a reasonable quality of life. And it almost has echoes of case studies in the US of using AI to deny insurance claims, which obviously faced a massive backlash, and more legislation was introduced to prevent that happening. What do you think of this one, Sam?
I mean, it's difficult to know without knowing more of the details of what it's actually trying to solve. If it is actually allowing people to gain better access, if we're going back to when AI works well, I mean, I still sometimes on the chatbot ask it for, please, can I just talk to a human being or an agent? Thanks very much. But if it is ensuring that there is better access and information for people trying to solve these problems and understanding more about disabilities or access around their pensions and support with that, then absolutely that's the right thing. But I think you're right, unless and it's always around the data that sits behind it, unless there's some real reassurance on that structure of that data and how they're managing it and how they're building those models, that's the bit that I would be interested to hear more about.
Absolutely. As you say, the oversight on top of that and, how decisions are made about people that have a massive impact on their lives, but making sure that there are as few mistakes as possible and maximum amount of guardrails.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I would love to finish our news section on, I started a petition, with the podcast team this week to start a sort of silliest tech news of the week. And we have two candidates actually. So we're kind of all guns blazing on our first silliest tech news of the week segment. So one is a man accidentally hacked 7,000 robot vacuums. Did you see this one, Sam? Did this come across your newsfeed?
Yeah, I did. And this actually, coming back to that AI access and Claude, and this is where it could go wrong, and really has, bless him.
Yeah, no, it's very, and I mean, both of these, they sound silly on the top, but there are some real lessons. So what happened is that this man, Sami Asdafal, he wanted to be able to control his robot vacuum with his PS5 controller, which sounds great. Also potentially slightly negates the point of having it direct itself around your house, but that's a different story for a different time. And so he used Claude Code to reverse engineer the sort of connection between the vacuum and its remote cloud servers. And what he did by accident is he gained access to data from other robot vacuum cleaners. So live camera feeds, microphone audio, maps. And again, that's nearly 7,000 devices across 24 countries through this back-end security bug. And of course, the manufacturer has since said, no, we solved the problem. But after they had said that, as Default, this man, he sort of said, well, actually, there are still some vulnerabilities that are left. So I don't know, it's funny on the surface and slightly terrifying underneath because he did this by accident. And he is a man, I think he's head of AI at a tech company. So he knows what he's doing when it comes to technology. But he was using Claude Code, which is a tool that's accessible to many more people without that expertise. And it does make you wonder, with this AI-enabled hacking, who are the malicious agents out there who might want to do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing about it. It's amazing, and it allows anyone to go out and build anything and, faster than they can versus, certainly within the Ellison, for example, we have very strict, data policies, DPO that's all over everything. We've recently had a conversation actually around Claude being on the park or not because of the impact that may or may not have, actually just with IP data and how we are building that across the institutes. And I think unless there's some, look, anyone can really go and use it, right? So but certainly within our institute, how do we ensure that people are able to go about like exploring, being innovative, but within guardrails and a structure, rather than just, some of these kids are coming out from uni and are just so incredibly smart, and just innovative and want to build. And we absolutely don't want to stranglehold that. But I think also sometimes there's not even always the thought of the threat or the vulnerabilities that you may or may not expose accidentally, as this poor guy did.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As you say, it's you don't want to stifle that innovation, but at the same
No.
time, we don't want people being filmed by their robot vacuums. Amazing. And so we've got one last piece of news, and this is our sort of second candidate for silliest tech news of the week. And this is Burger King actually is getting into the AI world. So, Sam, if you were Burger King and you had to name your AI agent, what would you call it, do you think?
It's a really good Mr. Chippy.
Oh, I like Mr. Chippy. Yeah, that's good. I thought originally the King, because obviously it's
Oh,
Burger
yeah.
King. They didn't go with either of those. I think they
No?
chose a fantastic name for their chatbot. It's called Patty. So credit to whoever's in marketing at Burger King who's named their chatbot
Genius.
Patty. And so the aim of this is it's kind of connected to the headsets that people working in Burger King restaurants use, and it's supposed to answer questions that employees might have about how to prepare a menu item, how the recipe goes, when a product might need restocking. It's ultimately aiming to streamline operations, but it has a second objective, which I think people are a little bit less comfortable with, which is about monitoring staff interactions with customers. And they actually have this concept of friendliness score. So the way the technology works is it picks up keywords like please and thank you, and then it scores teams or individuals based on how friendly they are and kind of oversees everything that's happening in store operations. And they're aiming for this to be sent and active in all restaurants in the US by 2026, which seems like it's pretty soon.
Yeah.
And they're sort of saying, it's not designed to record conversations or evaluate individual employees. But I think to me, it feels a little bit dystopic. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, it's a tiny bit Big Brother, isn't it? Yeah, we're watching you. But I wonder how long it'll last. They'll roll it out. And then I wonder what their NPS score will be at the end of 26. If they haven't been walked out. But yeah, I mean, you can see where the concepts come from, right?
Yeah.
They're there to try
Yeah.
and, speed up some of the operations as well from the teams. And, we talk about where you should apply AI. AI ops is probably one of the first places that's probably a safer bet, to start looking at. You've got the data, and as long as you've got good data, and I guess that they think that this is going to support the staff, streamline their operations. But yeah, I think let's watch that one through the year.
Absolutely. We will see. We'll report back on it quarterly.
Yeah.
So thank you, Sam, for coming with me through the news. We hope you found that useful. And we will be back in just a moment. So welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us. We are delighted to have some really, really exciting guest speakers on the podcast today, joining myself and Sam. We have Josh Silverstone and Jeremy Adcock from Hartley Ultrafast. And we are going to be talking about the future of machine intelligence, and all about bringing the speed of thought to the speed of light. So it sounds very science fiction-y, but Josh and Jeremy, would you be happy to introduce yourselves very briefly? Just let us know who you are at a high level, and then we will delve into lots of questions we have to try to understand what you guys are doing in the tech world.
Yep. My name is Josh Silverstone. I am founder and CEO here at Hartley Ultrafast. I have spent the better part of the last 15 years of my career trying to get light to think for itself. And what is very exciting about where we are now is that is becoming just about possible. So yes, I'm an engineer by training. I then did a PhD in physics. I'm Canadian. I came to the UK in 2011 for my PhD. Basically have been building up since then. I started my first company in 2016, Control Systems. Then I ran an academic career for a while, and went all around the world. And ultimately, we had a kind of twinkle in the eye which became Hartley Ultrafast around about the beginning of 2023. And maybe Jeremy will tell you about his perspective on some of that stuff. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So I met Josh when I just embarked on my PhD in 2014. And we spent 4 years trying to build bigger and better silicon photonic quantum computers. So that's using light, single photons, so quantum particles, to do a new kind of computation, which is called quantum computing. Now, we spent about 10 years developing this technology. In that time, the professors of our research group span out and moved to Palo Alto and now run the biggest quantum computing company in the world. They're out there. We stayed in the lab answering some of the science questions that remained on that technology. And some of the lessons that we learned from manipulating individual units of light, we are now bringing to the AI compute space and building computers that use light as well as transistors and logic to produce the fastest possible machine intelligence.
It's very, very exciting. So, I mean, Jeremy, you and I have known each other since we were both reprobates at university, and I have many memories of, over a pint of beer or cider because we were in Bristol, sort of trying to really understand, what are you guys building? Like, what does it actually mean? What does it do? Do you have an explain like I'm 5 version of the technology you're building? How is it different from traditional computing? And what are the major problems that you're going to be able to tackle with this new technology?
So traditional computers work on binary code, ones and zeros, and they take huge arrays of ones and zeros and do very simple operations like an AND gate or an OR gate. And ultimately, through having astronomical numbers of these bits and extremely fast processing, we're able to get things like, Windows or an operating system or this Zoom call. When used computing with light, we have very different constraints. So light is constantly on the go. It's not in one place, and it travels at the fastest possible speed. But it also has some kind of other unique properties that make it fantastic for certain kinds of computation. So the analogy we like to use is that if you wear glasses, those glasses are doing a huge transformation on the light that's going through it. And it does that in the time it takes the light to reach that focal point of the glasses. And you don't have to plug them in. They don't consume any power. Just the light itself for carrying information is all the power that you need. And these transformations that a lens does are the same kinds of transformations that are found throughout machine learning. These are called linear transformations. If you've got a bit of maths, this is like a matrix and a vector. They're very simple operations, but by combining them and cascading them, you can come up with almost arbitrary computation, and that's what kind of neural networks are able to do today.
At a high level, if I can add on to that, at a high level, what we're doing is we're not just doing these kind of matrix vector operations that Jeremy talks about. We're actually, in the hardware that we're developing, we're actually answering entire questions. So AI is a technology that allows you to answer questions, where you don't have a kind of rigid model underneath. It's just informed by the data that you put in to train that AI system at the start. And in the case of the hardware that we're building, we're able to get answers to those questions, that we're asking of the hardware in really record time. So the kind of timescales that we're talking about are in the nanoseconds. So nanoseconds are kind of a scary sounding amount of time. Nanosecond is like a billionth of a second. And if you like, so in the kind of first products that we're building to tell you kind of how big the banana is here. If you're sat in a room, today, dear listener, the kind of scale of that room is maybe 2 or 3 meters. In the time that it takes light to get from the walls of that room that you're sat in to your eyeballs is the same amount of time that it takes us to come up with an answer to a question with 300-odd thousand parameters in that model. And so really, we're talking about computing in a new regime of time. where we haven't been able to go before. So typical systems today will answer similar questions in a fraction of a microsecond, the next named time unit up.
That's amazing. So I wonder if the kind of problems that you're able to then tackle are the ones that, the computation time would take so long that we'll never see an answer in our lifetime, or there are specific use cases where you need an answer very immediately. I wonder, Sam, because you've spent some time at the Ellison Institute of Technology, and I know you guys tackle some really big questions. Maybe there's something in the use cases or the problems that you guys are focusing on that a technology like this might come into play and be very valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't got specifics, but I'm intrigued. Obviously, we're looking at how we can build scientific compute and the kind of the age-old GPU, NVIDIA and AMD, and we're building an Oracle Cloud infrastructure. Actually, at the moment, our teams, even in a week, we can't ingest enough data right now. Actually, is one of our problems, I think. Just because of the specifics that we're looking at. But I'm just intrigued what you think. Certainly, this will mean for kind of new business leaders, or anyone in the future. What does this look like in the future?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we're over here in the hardware space. I know lots and lots of your viewers will be thinking about software, especially, software runs on hardware. And what's interesting about what we're building is that we're allowing software, AI is software at the end of the day. And we're allowing that software to find its way into new places where you couldn't actually put AI, machine learning before. And those new places are ones where really time is of the essence. So we are not currently thinking about, okay, how can we be NVIDIA? How can we, kind of trounce them? There are many very smart people thinking about that, and many of them work at NVIDIA. But indeed, we're thinking about how actually this new shape of computer could move AI and machine learning into new spaces. So the spaces that we're thinking about, I talked about this like kind of meters and nanoseconds thing, right? That should make it really clear that our technology is most useful close to the thing that it's thinking about. So if you have to wait, a number of milliseconds to go up to data center, think about a thing, or maybe in an HPC, a high performance computing context, similarly, and then come back down to, I don't know, your phone or something, or some autonomous vehicle, that latency absolutely dominates. A millisecond is a million nanoseconds, right? And good, Jeremy's nodding, so I hit the arithmetic. Not one of my strengths, actually, but no, really, we're thinking about kind of edge applications. So these are applications where you want the computing to be local to the thing it's thinking about, whether that's on, an autonomous vehicle, whether that's inside of a robot, head, whether you're talking about aerospace defense. We've been talking to satellite companies, for example, to bring really fast intelligence to the networks that they're building. Networks have all kinds of intelligence, doing error correction, doing packet switching, et cetera, et cetera. In wireless environments, you think about spectrum allocation, deciding where to actually be transmitting and receiving. All of these are really fast decisions that people want to be able to make. And actually, AI, can't touch the sides of these decisions today because it's just not fast enough. And, it's like almost cliche to say, I just wish my computer was a bit faster. But the point is that there are applications out in the world where really that latency, as we see it, latency is the time it takes to get an answer to a question. We're bringing computing into new places to answer your question straightforwardly.
Yeah, which is it's interesting. Look, there's not specifics that I can give here, but certainly it's one of the things that we'll face into at the Ellison, where in fact, one of the conversations we were having the other day was whether we needed to build an on-prem data center because of the load that we're going to need to bring. Certainly when we're looking at robotics, how we're integrating instruments and devices that are obviously looking at, hundreds and hundreds, longer term of, experiments that actually quite a lot of the scientists might not want to capture, but the wider AI team and the data modeling team might want to capture, right? Because those are far more important for the longer term view of what the LSM might want to do as it builds out some of this kind of cross-cutting capabilities. That, and I think it'd be interesting to understand like what the model would, we talk about FinOps and cloud operating models and cost. One of the biggest things as well as anyone building AI platforms is the infrastructure and the cost. So I'd just be interested as well to hear, like, you might not have got there yet, what you're thinking about, what that looks like, if you're gonna put this tech in.
So Josh mentioned, because we're dealing with nanoscales, really the tech, the accelerator needs to be close by to its application. And so in thinking about scale, we are really almost at the small scale, but on very, very high performance. So you can always trade off space and time. And we're down there right at the shortest possible timescales. And that means that we can only do things so complex. Today, if you want to do something in a nanosecond, you might get 3 instructions on your CPU, whereas we're talking about answering a complex question about the world, about a video feed, about a time series, and getting almost human information out of it. And that means that really we're small scale, we're on the edge, but we are on the very high side of performance, really as high performance as humans are able to produce, really.
Coming back to your question about cost, I think ultimately we want to deploy technology. Our job is to develop cool stuff, but also to get it into people's hands. If the economics of that, don't stack up, then we failed, basically. Jeremy makes a good point, is that we're building right at the edge of what's possible today. This hardware that we're working on here at Hartley, this hardware is the fastest hardware that you can find on Earth, right, ever. And so we expect our customers to pay premium for that. And actually they'll have to, because this is new technology. The yields are low, the processes are advanced. And that just means that ultimately, when we're first getting into the market, and I should say that this is, I don't have a kind of silicon accelerator that I can show you today. We're working on this now. But when we get into the market, it's going to be towards the top end of that market. And, the exciting thing is that actually we kind of as society, civilization, have decided that compute is something we want to spend money on today. And, the direction of travel has been clear for a little while on that. But it is exciting to really see, the very biggest companies on Earth are now computing companies. And that's clear, right? That computing is a technology that cuts across. It fits in the space of what you guys are doing, Sam, but also fits, all the way down to Internet of Things stuff, and allows us to understand the world, allows us to predict what's going to happen. Indeed, we see one of the biggest applications of the technology that we're working on as being really time series prediction. Whether that's making predictions on financial markets, whether that's making predictions on, energy system performance, whether that's making predictions. We've been talking to fusion companies, right? These are guys trying to get chemistry to work that basically is so unstable that it doesn't, we haven't been able to get it to work. And our job is really to bring that stability, stability via intelligence. And this is, it's exciting to be at the absolute forefront. I think that as technology matures, it becomes more and more accessible, and I think that you'll find it in more places. Specifically, though, Sam, to your point about how we might fit into kind of high-performance computing contexts, we do see algorithms that people want to run. These are machine learning algorithms that people want to run, where you have stacked up sets of small models. Right. So as Jeremy said, we're only biting off really small pieces of compute here. And there are instances where those small models, or rather those large models, are actually many small models kind of back to back to back to back. And actually the latency of each of those little pieces stacks up to a latency of maybe a ChatGPT query or some kind of very large system on the end, some generative system. And yeah, we are thinking about that. We have had early conversations with some companies you will have heard of in how we can integrate with their systems and really, improve the quality of life for their customers as well.
It's really fascinating hearing you talk about being at the real forefront of what's possible now. And I'm very interested because you've both spent time in academia and now you're sort of in industry, and those two sectors have, very different reputations, different pressures, different drivers. How do you find, potentially being at the boundary, pushing the boundary? Would you consider yourself a kind of research company operating in a commercial space, or are you a purely commercial company? What are your thoughts on all of these factors?
Um, let me lay a direction of travel, and then I'll hand over to Jeremy. But yeah, there's no point developing technology if nobody uses it. Absolutely no point. Without speaking out of turn, I think that I can characterize both Jeremy and I as technologists, right? We love technology. We've both got PhDs in physics. But at the end of the day, if nobody uses the technology that we develop, then we have failed. And that's where really industry and, making the economics stack up. That's where that comes in, in anger. So with that, I'll pass off to Jeremy to give you his 2 cents as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to make a technology successful, really making it commercial is a kind of litmus test to whether it's going to be good for the world, useful for the world. It's not the only thing you need to make a company work. There are plenty of great pieces of technology that in a company that fail for other reasons, but it's at least the bare minimum. And after some time of being in university, it was frustrating seeing all this amazing work kind of almost get there or have this incremental improvement. And, then the paper sits online and ultimately it kind of doesn't get into the world. It doesn't help people. And so working at a startup's been really exciting in that we can actually bring this technology to the world, to people for good. And there's really there's nowhere to hide. You have to get it right. It has to work in a way that you can brush under the carpet in academia somewhat. And so that's really exciting.
It's a fascinating, it's novel, it's strange, but it's really fascinating, and it makes a lot of sense. So thank you so much for the conversation. Just before we let you go, is there anything else you would like to share, or anything that we didn't ask you but should have?
Good question, and we should have prepared a question for this or answer for this. But
That's fine.
no, I think I think that we're in a brave new world, and computing itself is changing really, really quickly. I think that with the end of Moore's law, right? Moore's law has been the thing that has powered really the acceleration of computing hardware over the last 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years. Moore's law is coming to an end. Transistors don't get much smaller anymore. They don't get much faster. And this leaves an opportunity for kind of weird and wonderful computers to come into the world. And I expect a huge fragmentation in the computing market in the coming kind of 5-10 year timescales. NVIDIA has this kind of magic money printing machine today, and they're going to operate that as fast as they possibly can for as long as they can, of course, as you'd expect. But I don't expect that they're going to be on top of the pile for very, very much longer, to be honest. I think that the world is finding computing which fits the kind of tasks that people have, the pain points that people have in the world. And I'm excited that we're able to offer, really interesting hardware for a particular corner of that problem space.
Amazing. Well, Josh and Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us on the CTO Lens podcast. It's been an absolute treat. Wishing you all the best and can't wait to see what the future holds.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us, and we hope you enjoyed our conversation with Josh and Jeremy over at Hartley Ultrafast. we now have our favorite segment of this podcast. It is the mid-episode game. As always, we don't know what we're going to be quizzed on. And Sam, this week you are flying the flag for David, who is winning, but I did win the last 2 weeks consecutively, so we'll see where we land.
I mean, I'm super competitive, so this isn't going to go.
Bring it on. It's going to be great. And we should have...
The pressure's on.
It is on. This is a very serious part of the podcast. And we should have a mid-episode game fairy hovering somewhere in the background. Luke, welcome.
Awesome. A nice surprise to have Sam this week. No more David. It's a much more comfortable environment for me to be in. But no, cool. This week, we are going to play a game. And Sam, it is your debut. Sophie is on a bit of a hot streak. But this week's game is called...
Modern Women Tech Leaders.
We're going to call this game Modern Women Tech Leaders. So it's a very simple game, this one. It's just a straight up quiz. I'm going to ask you 7 questions about famous people from the past and currently in tech. So I'm going to give you an A, B, and C option, and all you have to do is give me the answer you think is correct. There might be some clues along the way to try and help you with your answers, but it's not the easiest quiz I've ever put together. But that's going to be okay because we've got plenty
Wait a
of
minute,
options.
this is my first one.
Yeah, well, we'll have to throw
You can
people
handle
in
it, Sam.
We've got plenty
Wait
of
a minute,
options.
this is my first one.
Yeah, well, we'll have to throw
You can
people
handle
in
it, Sam.
depends. You'll know at least one of the answers out of the 7, so that's okay. So the first question for this week's quiz is: who is famous for writing the first computer program? Was it A, Grace Hopper, B, Ada Lovelace, or C, Hedy Lamarr?
B.
I
Okay,
think
Sam
B
says
as
B.
well. Yeah. Yeah.
You are both correct. There we go. Off to a fly. Maybe not the hardest quiz in the world. So Ada Lovelace wrote the first algorithm intended to be processed by a machine, making her the first computer programmer. There you go. Big shout out to
Amazing.
Ada.
Well done,
Right.
Ada. Fun fact, actually, I have a friend who is a data person who actually once spoke at a London Tech Leaders event, and he named his daughter Ada after Ada Lovelace, which I thought was really sweet.
Second
That
fun
is very nice.
Yeah.
fact, the Ellison Institute's London office was Ada Lovelace's former home,
Oh, that is a fun
There
fact.
we go.
St James's Square.
It's almost like I knew all those facts, and that's why we designed that. The first question. Right, second question. Who is known as the mother of the internet? So it's 1-1. We're looking for A, Radha Perlman, B, Grace Hopper, or C, Hedy Lamarr. So who was the mother of the internet? So they invented the spanning tree protocol, which allows networks to communicate reliably. So you got A, Radha Perlman, B, Grace Hopper, C, Hedy Lamarr.
I think I want to rule out C because I think Hedy Lamarr did something else, and I don't want to say what it is in case it comes up later in the quiz. I'm going to say A.
Okay, so you've got A, Radha Perlman. Sam?
Well, then let's go B.
B, Grace Hopper is incorrect. It was A, Radha Perlman. So she invented the spanning tree protocol. So 2-1 to Sophie. Okay, moving on to a little bit more of a leadership angle. Susan, I don't know why I said Susan Wojcicki is or was the CEO for which major tech platform? So she became the CEO in 2014, and we can have either A, Google, B, YouTube, or C, Facebook.
B.
So you've gone B, YouTube, Sam. Sophie,
Yeah, B.
you're also going for YouTube? Correct. Susan, I won't try and say her last name again, has led YouTube since 2014 and expanded it into the world's largest video platform. There we go. Cool. Moving on to the modern world of dating, online dating. So who is the CEO and co-founder of Bumble, the popular dating app? So this person became the youngest self-made female billionaire when Bumble went public. So is it A, Whitney Wolfe Herd, B, Reshma Saujani, or C, Marissa Mayer?
I'm going to go for A.
Yeah, me too.
A is correct. Whitney Wolfe Herd. She was the first self-made female billionaire. Lovely. So we're currently sitting.
Fun fact about her, I'm going to judge. She did the thing where you press the button at the New York Stock Exchange
Oh,
to,
yeah.
I don't know, turn on the stocks or whatever it does.
Yeah.
And she took her baby with her, which is great because you can be a mother and you can be the youngest, first self-made billionaire, whatever it was.
There we go. Okay, moving on to question number 5. According to our partners at CTO, what percentage of engineering leadership roles are held by women? Is it A, 15%, B, 7%, or C, 9%?
A. I'm going to say A.
So Sophie's gone A, 15%, B, 7%, or C, 9%.
I'll go C.
Correct, Sam. You're back in the game. There we go. Oh, I think it is 2-2. That's my guess on what the score is, but I know it's definitely level. So, quick fact. CTO reports that only 9% of engineering roles are held by women, highlighting the ongoing gender gap in technology leadership. Okay. Who was the first female CTO of major US company IBM? Was it A, Megan Smith, B, Sheryl Sandberg with an S, very controversial spelling, or C, Ginny Rometty? This person had previously held leadership roles at Google and IBM.
B.
So you went B, Cheryl with an S,
With
Sandberg.
Cheryl. Yeah,
Ooh,
can I spell it with
double
a
answer.
C?
No, you have to use an S, unfortunately. But you're both wrong. So Megan Smith is the answer. She was the first US CTO of IBM.
Wow.
And then, so last question, winner takes all. You're not allowed to answer the same question because I don't have a tiebreaker. So in 2026, roughly what percentage of software engineers are women? So I'm not sure where our number has come from, but forecast suggests that women are expected to hold around this number in 2026. So I think it might be a generated number, but this is the answer for today. So is it A, 18%, B, 30%, or C, 26%?
I would have said higher than any of those.
Yeah, I would have done too. But no, we can't go for the same answer.
Oh, that's okay.
So you've got A, 18, B, 30, or C, 26.
Sam, as guest, would you like to choose your answer first?
You are so courteous.
I'll go B. Go on.
I'll go C.
What did you say, Sam? Sorry?
B.
Well, that's bad news because neither of you are correct. So it is 18% is the projected forecast of software engineering roles in 2026.
Wow, that's way
Yeah,
off.
a surprising number.
That
a
is
surprising
surprising.
number.
We're seeing a large number of female engineers coming through, but that's
Like I said, this was more of a generated question, that one. It didn't actually get backed up by any stats at all. So maybe that's wrong, and maybe what you guys are seeing is slightly more accurate. Okay, so we've got a tiebreaker. We have to do a tiebreaker, and I've had a question earlier for our friend Sheryl Sandberg. So she is actually famous for her role at Facebook/Meta, and she has a best-selling book.
Oh.
And I'm only going to give you 2 answers, so one of you has to be right. So the question, what was the title of said book? Was it A, Lean In, or C, The Future is Female? Our friend Sheryl Sandberg with an S. Okay, we've got an A.
I'll go for
Sam's
B.
gone Lean. So Sam's debut, and she's gone to Lean In, and she is correct. So 4-3 to Sam, and she's this week's winner. What a debut.
What a debut.
And
Well done, Sam.
that could be 100. That's 100% winning record, and no one else can say that so far. So perhaps you are the greatest to ever play them in episode game. But on that note,
David down either.
on that note, I will leave you, and I know you've got a great conversation coming up. But thanks for playing, and I'll see you all next week.
So thank you for sticking around to play and to our audience to listen to the mid-episode game. And I think just to round off this episode, we couldn't have our International Women's Day week episode without stopping briefly to talk about, what International Women's Day means to us. And I did prepare some statistics for this, although I think based on the answers of the quiz, they're all completely wrong.
I was going to say.
So, my statistics were perhaps a little bit more positive, but, just to sort of set the scene. And, their numbers, they're going to be different in different places and for different countries and demographic. But what I had is that women make up roughly 28% 30% of the global tech workforce, but only around 15 to 20% of those people make it to senior tech leadership roles. As suggested by data from CTO, it could be as low as 9%. Some organizations, it'll definitely be much lower. Some different, kind of countries, different cultures, it'll really, really vary. But research also shows that the largest drop-off tends to happen at the sort of first promotion to management. So it's not that the leadership pipeline, it's not hiring, it's this question of retention and promotion. We also see that only 2% of VC funding goes to female-founded startups. And obviously the kind of demographic that you have in the leadership of your company really shapes ultimately what you build. And it's important across a number of different vectors, including healthcare, where I work, safety products, consumer tools, there's a lot of impact there. So I think seeing this challenge of we don't have women represented in leadership is, it's going to be significant impact. And I'm sure that, Sam, that must be something that you've seen throughout your career as well.
Yeah, I think, it's so important to have female leaders sitting in those leadership roles. We talk about be the thing you want, see the thing you want to be. And that is, I just think, so important. You've now got, things like the Women in Tech Task Force that was set up by Liz Kendall, the technology secretary, with kind of some key influential women in there. And I think that's really important so that we can start driving that kind of greater gender diversity, because we clearly still have an issue with women joining technology, but also staying in technology. And I think anything that we can do to continue to build that out, I've seen it. I've often sat in rooms, and I still do now. And I always had this thing when I first started in tech, how many women were in the room versus how many men. And actually, that percentage really hasn't changed that much. I've been blessed to work in some companies where there's a better mix, and a better kind of, I'm probably, maybe 3 or 4 out of 10 sitting in a room. But I'm often in a room and I'm the only woman, and I work in sport and tech and science. And that's kind of shows, maybe there's more in healthcare, because of the kind of nature of healthcare. But yeah, I mean, we have to keep pushing. We have to keep being seen. We talked about those male advocates. It's so important, and how do we drive that? Whether we're smaller or whether we're massive at enterprise level, how do we support women to push through that, glass ceiling and barrier?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm so with you. And for me, that's why International Women's Day matters so much in this general concept of spotlighting women doing incredible things, because, for all of the reasons we've listed, technology shapes society, and, visibility at the top of the funnel, really importantly, as well as healthier migration through the funnel is what's going to get us there. Yeah. So it's not just, who is being hired at a junior level, as you say, it's who's speaking in meetings. I remember there was a sort of meeting transcription software that I downloaded a while ago, and tried it out in a couple of sort of big meetings where there was a mix of genders, and it said who was speaking for what percentage. And you can make a guess as to, not only how many men versus women were in the room, but who was speaking for longer and whose opinions were dominating. And, when you talk about Hippo, the highest paid person's opinion is sometimes the one that's going to win. You can guess the gender of that person. But, certainly spotlighting women is something that can help those junior women really see themselves reflected in the future of their companies, saying, oh, there's an amazing woman at the helm, and I can be like that as well. And I think it also helps, everyone else to say, okay, well, I've seen these amazing women contributing. I know that it's real. And so I'll make sure that I'm creating space for these women to speak, and really a rising tide lifts all ships. I'll give you a good example. I'm co-founder of a neurotechnology community. And within that, I've been running a series of articles spotlighting women who are doing absolutely amazing things in the world of neurotechnology, which is highly, highly technical and so stereotypically seen as really male dominated. And going into starting this series, which I've been running for 2 or 3 years now, in my mind, if I thought of a kind of a neurotech leader, it was a man. But having spent so much time speaking to this women and just learning about the amazing things that they're doing, whenever I think of a neurotech leader, my mind is crowded with these incredible women. And it's not that more women are doing it, it's just that exposure. And so for me, that's why International Women's Day is so important, to really create that representation, but also as an opportunity to think about what are the systems that cause this inequity, why should we tackle them, and how we can do it.
Yeah. I think it's so important to surround yourself as well by women that will also support you. You know, we've got our event coming up this week, which I'm really looking forward to. And one of those things is being in that room, you know, Chatham rules, but there's a support network there that you can lean on. And I'm also part of a Women in Transformation group. I think there's about 70 of us in it now as well. And it's just great to be able to reach out to people and ask them, you know, I just got this problem. And you might not necessarily ask that in the wider context, right? So I think it's so important that we hold ourselves up. I'm racing in 2 weeks. I'm a rower, and I'm racing in 2 weeks at the Women's Head of the River. And that's, you know, 350 crews, all women's crews, all eight, all out on the river. Just, you know, like that is embodiment and empowerment of like female strength and power, and how you can work as a team together. And, you know, it's something that I enjoy. And look, I race with men as well, but there's something really special about being in that environment, and kind of training together and, you know, seeing the ups and downs of it. So yeah, it's incredibly important to me.
Amazing. Well, I think that's true for everyone who's going to be joining us at the event later this week in just a few days. So I think that's probably all about all we have time for. So just to wrap us up, we've had a fantastic episode welcoming Sam to step in for David in celebration of International Women's Day week. We've taken ourselves through the news. We've discussed the impact on technology of sort of conflicts happening in the Middle East. We've explored uses of AI, whether the Pentagon is going to continue to be able to use Claude with fully autonomous weapons and mass domestic violence. We've also talked about a sort of pre-mortem of what could happen if AI is wildly successful and is adopted. What are these negative externalities we could see emerging? We've looked at how the civil service wants to start using AI. And we also had a few silly stories of someone who accidentally hacked a whole bunch of Hoovers, and Burger King's new AI bot, Patty. We also had a wonderful conversation with Jeremy Adcock and Josh Silverstone from Hartley Ultrafast Computing, where they told us all about using sort of optical intelligence to start to really enable the most advanced, most complex, the heaviest sort of machine learning and AI challenges as we're starting to really hit that ceiling of compute. And so it'll be really exciting to see how their technology continues to develop. We also had the mid-episode game where Sam did fantastically and won another point for David. And that was again celebrating some incredible women in technology. And we had a brief chat about what International Women's Day means to us, and how we are hoping that all of these efforts will support greater equity within the tech sector. So thank you so much, Sam, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure to have you. And thank you for joining us. And we will look forward to hearing more from you and from our other panelists at our event on Thursday, celebrating International Women's Day, and discussing how we can use culture as a leadership tool. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week.